Adam Smith made the following claim. If we allow everyone to freely decide what they'll produce, consume, buy, and sell, and the prices they're willing to pay or sell things for, then it will regulate the prices of objects. More importantly, it will regulate the prices of goods and services in a way that more or less reflects the amount of trouble it takes to produce them. Now, we're going to leave aside the idea of amount of trouble for now, right? But I want to talk about how this works. It has to do with something that's sometimes called queuing, which is British for lining up. Let's take a look at an example of how queuing works. Suppose that we've got 4 people, Alice, Bert, Charlie, and Daniel. Alice and Bert are bakers, Charlie and Daniel are wheat farmers. And let's assume they're the only people around. At least Alice and Bert are the only ones buying wheat right now, and Charlie and Daniel are the only people selling it. Well, let's say that together, Alice and Bert need 5 bushels of wheat. Now together, right, or in total, Charlie and Daniel have been producing 7 bushels of wheat. Well, what's going to happen to the price of wheat? It's going to go down. Right? Why is the price of wheat going to go down? Well, because Charlie and Daniel have more that they can sell. Right? There's only demand for 5 bushels. They've got 7 bushels total. So each of them wants to be the one, to the extent possible, that Alice and Bert are buying from. And how do they compete to get Alice and Bert to buy from them and not from the other? They compete by lowering their prices. So when there's an excess of something relative to demand, the price goes down. Now, here's the thing. As the price goes down, right, the following will happen. It's quite possible that Ellen will suddenly decide, hey, look, I was doing something else, but I could get into baking. Right? Because of my lack of equipment or something else, it really wasn't a good idea for me to get involved in baking. It costs too much relative to the profit, but that was before the price of wheat started going down. Right? So now I'm going to come along. I'm going to start baking. Well, that increases the demand. Right? When you increase the demand, what happens? Well, when you increase the demand, if the demand increases above the supply, then the price will start to go back up. Why is that the case? Well, now the tables are turned, right? Things are flipped around. Now, there's not enough wheat to meet the demand. So Alice, Bert, and Ellen are now competing to get the wheat. And how do you compete to get something when there's a lack of it? Right? You compete by offering more money for it. So Charlie and Daniel will start raising their prices because now they can, right? Because these others are going to have to compete to get the wheat. Now, that will happen to a certain extent. Right? At some point, the price of wheat might rise to the point where one of 2 things happens. Right? Either Ellen says, oh, now it's back up, it's too expensive, I'm going to quit baking and go back to what I was doing before. Right? Or suddenly Francis will say, hey, look, price of wheat has been going up. Right? So I have land that's not really all that good for producing wheat. I've been producing oats. So what am I going to do? Well, I'm going to start producing wheat now because it wasn't worth it when it was at a lower price. But now that the price has risen to a certain point, it's worth it for me to come in and start producing wheat. But of course, as he produces wheat, that means the supply goes up relative to the demand. Or if Ellen drops out of the market for wheat, then the demand has gone down. Right? And what will that do? Well, if the supply goes above the demand or the demand goes below the supply, then the price starts coming back down again. So notice what happens. Based on the availability and the demand, people set what they're willing to pay and what they're willing to sell it for. When supply exceeds demand, prices go down. When demand exceeds supply, prices go up. But of course, that causes people to adjust, right? The demand is partly responsive to the supply, right? And the supply is partly responsive to the demand. So things tend to even out over time, right? Now, why is this a good thing? Well, one reason it's a good thing is the following. remember I said that Ellen wasn't quite as well equipped to produce bread, right, as Alison Burt. And Francis his land was better for oats, not so good for wheat. Right? Well, so what should determine whether or not Francis produces wheat? Well, it makes sense for Francis to produce wheat when there's a great need for it. Right? The person who's in the worst position for growing it, right, it makes sense to have them not grow it until there's really a high demand for it. Right? So basically, notice one of the things that happens is when there's a scarcity of something, people switch to substitutes. If for some reason pens have to become very expensive, more people use pencils or tablets and notebooks and other things. Okay. When pens become less expensive, then it makes more sense for people to switch back to using pens rather than these other costly things. So the idea is the pricing system causes these adjustments, right, which leads to a better distribution of goods and services because things are being used at their most effective thing, at least in the most effective way relative to the demand for them. Right? And that creates a situation where, in general, people's needs and desires are met better than any other arrangement.